Hi, and welcome to another podcast. And today we have Charles with us, who helps directors and shareholders get the maximum they can from selling or moving on from their business which they've built. So just as a reminder, my name's Andrew Kirkley from the Academy World, and what we do is we help SMEs build their businesses to be successful and actually end up working with someone like Charles to help you with an exit route. But Charles, first of all, welcome.
Thank you very much. Good to be here.
And you seem to have two names, just to get down to this one first. I've got you Charles and Charlie. So what's going on there?
Yes, that's true. Charles is the name my mother used when she told me off. It's also the name in my passport. And it's the name that I therefore use in what I would think of as official situations. So on a business card, on LinkedIn and everything else, you will see it written down as Charles. But as previously noted, that's the one that my mother used to tell me off with. So I rather prefer to be called Charlie, and certainly all my friends call me Charlie.
Okay, so when it's nice and relaxed, informal conversations, Charlie, but if we're getting very serious, then we revert to Charles, yes?
Yep, that's about it.
Okay, so you do a fascinating role, don't you? Because you help business owners who have gone through all the trials and tribulations of building their business to taking, I'm going to say very often they consider it as their baby, I'd imagine, and maximizing its opportunity to get as much money as they possibly can to either reinvest in something else, retire, or actually potentially still be involved in it. So the question is, I guess, I hadn't actually come across a service like yours previously. I'd obviously dealt with and spoken with, I'm going to say, brokerages which help sell businesses, but not one which I'm going to say packages it all up. But can you just talk through for our listeners, what's the difference between you and a sales broker?
Okay, so a sales broker is, as you quite rightly point out, someone who handles the logistics and the whole process of the actual transaction. But what I do is I help the businesses become what we call exit ready. So very often business owners do lots of things and also put off lots of things that perhaps they should do whilst they're running their business. And in my view, a lot of businesses are not yet exit ready at the point the owner would like to sell them. So they could go to a broker, but I think the value that they would achieve if the business actually was sold at all would be significantly reduced, and they'd be quite disappointed if they went directly to the broker and attempted a sale.
Okay, so just to give some flavour of what we're going to be, why we're going to be covering what we're covering in this podcast and conversation, is what sort of increase in valuation do clients get? I say, how long's a piece of string? This question probably after going through the process with you. What sort of differences are there between not going through this process and going through this process?
Okay, well, just to give a teaser about the first part of our process, the first part of the process is actually what we call a business insights report, which actually says where the business is now. And fortunately or unfortunately, there are no punches pulled. If there are improvements that could or should be made to the business, we will write those down in the report and share that with the owner. But by having a long list of improvements that are required, that impacts very negatively on the sales value or even the ability to sell the business at all. So from that starting place, we would generally say that it is likely that a business can be at least double, so 2 to 2.5 times our initial valuation is what somebody should expect to get from the program. So if we put that in numbers, if a business is, we think, worth around about £1 million before the process, then they should expect to sell it for between £2 and £2.5 million at the end of the process.
That's just a humongous difference, isn't it? So to give some perspective on this, how did you get to be doing what you do? That's got to be the question.
I'll try and keep the answer short, but it is quite a long answer in that I've been dealing with businesses most of my working life, and I've always wanted things to be done well. And in my own personal life, when I was in corporate, I had quite a busy job. I was fronting a European piece of business, and it meant that my time was short. Lots of people were making demands on it, and I had to be personally efficient, and I had to do things well. And I learnt from my peers around me, and I hopefully used my time wisely. And then when I retired from that, I thought, well, this is interesting. I've got a lot of knowledge in here, and I'd love to pass that on. So I became somebody who was very interested in helping business owners grow. And by potentially happy coincidence, I noticed that the business I was helping to become slick and easy to run and nice businesses actually were getting sold. Not long after I'd finished with the business owner and he was happy, he'd got a nice business, it was running well and profitably, it would sell for a lot of money. And the business owners were coming back and saying, hey, Charlie, I've just sold it. They came to me. I didn't even put it on the market. This is fabulous. They saw I was an attractive business. And I thought, And then along came Succession Plus, and they've actually been doing this. They started in 2009 in Australia, and they effectively headhunted me and said, Charlie, we've seen what you're doing. Would you like to be a part of Succession Plus in the UK? So it was a massively good fit because they have the structures and the systems and everything in place to make sure that what we do is repeatable and good.
All right. So you have, I'm going to say, access and backing of an international company, I'm going to say.
That's right. So the whole company, the Australian part, as I say, started in 2009 by Dr. Craig West, and about it must be 5 years ago now, Succession Plus started in the UK. So yes, there's more than one of me at Succession Plus in the UK, and we are part of an international business which is also operating in the US.
Okay. So let's pretend I'm going to sell my business. How far in advance of me making this decision to sell business should we be talking to someone like you?
Well, I think the first question I'd actually ask you is, have you thought about selling your business? And it sounds as if you want to tell me, yes, Charlie, I have, but I haven't got much further than that. So you're already, you are already ahead of so many business owners because most of them haven't thought about it yet. Because they don't realize the complexity of it. So well done, first of all, for having a think about it, that you might want to do it and you're looking at what's involved, because I think that it's generally about 18-month, 2-year process to get to what I call exit ready. And that simply means that everything in your business is running at best practice. So when the potential purchaser comes along and does their due diligence, they will not find a thing. They will be delighted at what they see in your records and everywhere else, and it's likely they'll offer you more. But to answer your question, about 2 years is a good round number.
Okay. I'm wondering with this conversation if it's better initially to go through what a potential purchaser is normally looking for, and then reverting back to see how we get there. I mean, what if you've never sold a business before, what is the typical purchaser looking for when they buy something, as far as not necessarily talking about what the business does necessarily, but actually the spreadsheets and the black and white.
Yeah, it all boils down to the person who's going to buy the business is going to make an investment. So by implication, they will be spending probably a good deal of money, and therefore that investment they are about to make has to be funded somehow. So in order to pay back the money that they have borrowed or are lucky enough to have in their own bank account, when they make that investment, they are looking for a good return. So the good return typically comes from profits. So if the profits are substantial or good enough in the eyes of the investor, the buyer, that's a tick in the box. The investor will want to know that their investment is protected in the long term, i.e. the business will continue to function where it is today or better. So if you can show a potential buyer that you have a graph that says profits are up, turnover is up, We have long-term staff retention. We have everything in order. There are no skeletons in the cupboard. There is nothing bad going on in this business, nor has there been for at least the last 3 years. Then the investor is likely to say, yep, I can take this. It fulfills my need. And financially, it is a good risk. Or in fact, it's not really a risk at all, because everything that's been pointed out to him just looks good. And if the business is a good fit, where if it's you selling me your business, I would say that I can sell my products to your customers and you can sell my products. And so another good fit that the investor or the buyer is looking for is, are my products complementary to yours? Are my customers complementary to yours? So if your customers buy my product and my customers buy your product, then again, that's a match made in heaven, and it will increase the value of the business being sold.
Okay. So ultimately, any buyer is looking for a tidy house, as I want to define it as.
Yes, very much so. And one of the things that they will shudder at and usually stops the sale of a business in its tracks is what we call owner dependency. So it's the business owner. He's probably started the business from nothing. As you said earlier, it's his or her baby, and he knows everything about it. It's all up here. There's not a question he can't answer, but none of it is written down. And he probably hasn't delegated terribly successfully to his managers. So that's a big problem.
Okay. Now, obviously, we spoke before recording this podcast, and you gave me what I consider as a terrifying fact that I think you said to me that around 80% of businesses either don't sell or don't sell for anything that the owners thought they were going to. Is that, did I get that right?
I'm afraid you did, Andrew. Yes. So there are statistics that are very readily available out there that says exactly that only 1 in 5 businesses will sell at or above the level that the owner is hoping for. And as just mentioned, the primary cause of a business not selling at all is, number one, owner dependency, where everything is in the owner's head. And secondly, you can just tell when you walk in, the place is a mess. Things are not documented at all, or certainly not well enough. And that's the processes. It might be stock levels. It might be cash flow. There are so many things that a business owner can carry in their head. And there are so many things that should be recorded. And when either of those happens, poor recording or a lack of recording of things, or everything is in the business owner's head, buyers come up and say, well, when you're gone, what do I actually get? What, as a new owner, what do I get? Customer book and chaos, and will the employers go if you go? So if it's not planned through, it tends to be doomed to failure, I'm afraid.
So hence why you need sort of 18 months to 2 years to sort of prep a business for going to market. So we've covered what happens at the end of the journey. So just to fulfill, I would imagine that this is only for large businesses you do this for, or what size businesses?
Typically, it's businesses who are at or aspire to be at the £1.5 million mark, and they are typically characterised by being run by the business's original founder, and also that the founder is still doing a lot of work. So there is unlikely to be a full management board or board of directors. So typically above £1 million, and typically with 10 or 15 or more employees. And the top ceiling, by the way, is really by how well the businesses are organised further downstream. Because once you get to the sort of 5, 6, 7, £10 million mark, they tend to have a proper board of directors, and that board of directors tends to know between them how to run a business properly, and so therefore they're unlikely to need advice from someone like me. But of course, I'm happy to give it.
So when you say £1 million, £1.5 million as a starting point, is that the turnover or the value?
That's the turnover.
The turnover. Okay, fine. So let's go to the beginning of the journey. So now our listeners will know that if they go through a journey with someone like yourself, they could potentially double or more, not only double or more the valuation of the business, but actually increase the likelihood of selling significantly. But where do you start?
We start with this business insights report, but before that, we have a meeting with the business owner before they become a client, while they're a prospect and while they're still thinking about it, because I want to describe to them that in my mind, I believe there are 3 parallel journeys that need to happen simultaneously. So the first one is the business owner. They've, the light bulb moment has happened. They realize they want to sell the business, and I will start asking them questions about where next. Is it your intention to retire? Do you want to sell this and start something else? Where do you want to be after the business? Do you want to have some new hobbies that you can spend all your lovely funds on? What is it you want to do? Because that is a massive part of the journey. Because another sad statistic is that for business owners who sell a business on Friday and have nothing to do on Monday, unfortunately, they seem to have nothing to live for. And unfortunately, they're no longer with us a year or 18 months later, which is quite a sad statistic. So secondly, we have the business itself. What does the business owner want for the business? Because at either end of the scale, you've got the sell it to the fellow with the deepest pockets, nothing else matters. And at this end of the scale, you've got the staff, they're my friends. They've been working with me for 20 years. I want to make sure they're looked after. And as much as I can, I want the business to carry on with its current legacy. This is what we stand for. And I don't want that to be lost just because a new owner has it. So you've got those 2 extremes. And I need to know what the business owner wants. And then thirdly, you have the employees, because usually in a successful sale, the new owner will want the businesses to stay. So the employees need to be reassured that the business is being sold so that it can grow, become better, become stronger, and you still have a job after Andrew sells it. So there are those 3 journeys that all need to be managed carefully. So the first thing that happens is we have a discussion with the owner and I find out what they want. And when they say, yeah, I definitely want to sell, I definitely want to go down that route, then it's the business insight reports that I mentioned earlier. And that's quite a big report. It's something like 55 pages. It'll take us probably 3 months to put that together and present it back to you. And for us, that's the real starting point. We present the report and say, look, I know you may not be aware of all of this, but this is where your business is today. And the last page of the business insights report says, this is your valuation today. And if you follow the steps, this is where we think we can get it to in 2 years, 2.5 years time, based on our track record and your business details that we've shared with you so far.
So my concern regarding what you just said there is that if my team, my staff, find out that you're in and you're asking them questions and all these sort of scenarios, then they're going to get nervous about something which I'm thinking 2 years down the line potentially to I put it on the market. Is this not an issue?
Andrew, sorry, I must have given you the wrong impression on that, because you are absolutely right. The employees do not need to know anything about it until, if you like, the run up to the transaction is happening. So the business owners will see perhaps that a man in a suit is coming in to improve and help the business. And at that point, that's the way it's normally described to employees. Yeah, this Charlie chap, he will be coming round because I'm looking at making the business bigger, better, and stronger. And that's the message from the owner to his employees. And I go around and I may or may not talk to people, but the actual reason or the long-term goal is not mentioned. You're absolutely right.
Okay. So I can see how that would be a reassurance. So if I had to ask you what are the 3 biggest typical challenges need to be put right, other than the business owner running the business and being totally essential on it. What would be those three things?
Documentation, documentation, and documentation. So the first one is all about processes. So usually a business will produce something, goods or services, and at the lower end of the size of business, you find that it's often done that way because it's always been done that way. So the question needs to be asked, is that the best way to run it? And you look through, and if that's the best way to run it, then you simply document the process so that anyone else who comes along as a new employee or a new owner can see how things are done to best effect. And if you remember the goal to have everything running at best practice, then it may be that some of those things are improved along the way. But certainly the processes need to be documented initially. Another thing that needs to be documented well is everything about finance, because it may surprise you to know that some business owners can only tell you what's in the bank, and they use the bank balance as a barometer of the health of the business. They have no idea what bills are coming in this week, this month. Which suppliers do they have to pay? Do they have to pay them on time? Do they have a clue? Another thing that might surprise you is many business owners have no idea of the number of debtor days that their customers are paying them. In other words, are their customers paying on time? And the recent example had an average of 120 days debt. So although he was on 30-day terms with his customers, they didn't pay on average for 120. So some paid on time and some must have been taking 200 days. So finances, documentation, cash flow, everything about finance should be documented and should be presented to him in a way that he can understand.
Do you find that, it sounds to me there's quite a lot of work here, and a typical business owner, of course, they want to get as much money as they can for their hard work, and realize that. But this is going to take a lot of their time up, which could potentially take their eye off the ball for their business, which therefore could affect the business. You're shaking your head at me. So
I am shaking my head because it is a potentially natural assumption that for the outcome that we desire, you would expect it to take a huge amount of input. But with our processes, the first thing that we do is actually to help the business owner have more usable time. Because if you remember, public enemy number one was owner dependency. So that's something that we have spent a lot of time studying in a lot of different businesses. And so whilst it's initially tough for the business owners to relax and to not do everything he was doing before, when it actually comes to it, the business owners are massively relieved. They're no longer working 60, 70 or more hours per week. And they're like, wow. So it's an initial benefit. It's a quick win for us. The business owner is delighted. And very often the husband or wife is delighted because they get to see more of their partners. But then, so we free up their time, and they are also able to begin to delegate either internally or externally. But everything we do is a suggestion to the business owner, because it is still the owner's business, and we have come in to help them, and we want them to understand the benefit. Because if we do it, we're just as bad as they are. When the business is sold, we won't be around either. So it's massively important that the business, and especially the owner, understand the changes that are being made and actually make them themselves and reap the benefits from it very quickly.
So the journey you're taking business owners down will improve their systems, which therefore, although there's an investment there, it will actually release time and give them more time for business and life.
Yes, very much so. And I'd also like to point out that you use the word investment there, and most people jump to a conclusion of that means I have to tip money in, and that is not the case. very often the changes that we suggest is more of a change, and yes, they need to put something different in, but it's normally better working, easier working, as I said, delegation, whatever it might be. So yes, there is an investment in change, but it's not normally a big financial investment.
Okay. So moving on to another area which I understand is really important. It's an area which we're close to because we also help businesses with automation, integration of AI. But if I said 4 letters to you called data, I would imagine how much sort of you're laughing, so I'm assuming that often becomes a challenge for you.
Yes, and data needs to be useful, because you're absolutely right. A potential purchaser wants to know as much as possible about the business, the risk he is thinking about spending his money on. So the more fact that you can put in front of the buyer, the better. And if you suggest something is fact, you jolly well better have data to back up the sentence that says this is a fact. Because if you don't have it, the potential buyer will simply assume you cannot prove it, and therefore it does not exist. And that knocks your valuation down. So either you'll get a very poor offer because you can't prove what you've said is true, or the owner will walk away because, you know what, the owner doesn't actually know what he's talking about. He's making claims that are simply not provable. So yes, data is massively, massively important. And you also need to be able to prove what you've said over a period of time. So if I said to you, as for instance, oh yes, our sales have gone up by 10% year on year. If I can't prove that to you, if I can only prove it for the last 1 year, why did I say anything as foolish as it's been happening for 3 years? I need to show you 3 years history that says this is what it was, went up, went up, went up, and I need to lay it out in front of you, because buyers, you know, they need facts, otherwise they won't invest their money in your business.
So my assumption is that you need to have a data channel from the first amount of money spent on marketing to get the lead, or spent on a commodity to make a product, all the way through to being paid for it, and potentially any warranty issues, having to deal with it from there. So you need to take it all the way from the very first point to the very last point with the various percentage ratios and costs.
Absolutely right. And I like the marketing idea that you brought up there, that you as a business decided to spend money on marketing. So if you can say this was a marketing campaign that set out to do this, and this was its success rate, and so you can, you know, therefore say, and therefore we continued it, or we changed it, or whatever, because that would be of immense interest to a potential buyer, because they'll see how your marketing has worked. They can see that some have gone better, some have gone less well. Great information for them as they're taking over. They can understand the marketing costs that you've had as a business, and they might decide to double it, because they might say, well, if I double it, I'll get twice as much business. But they have the information to make their decisions on. And if they can make decisions that are helping, you know, like ticking boxes, yes, 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 like it, like it, like it, if they can make those decisions which make them favor the business as a purchase, yes, they'll love it. And that's what we set out to achieve.
So that's but quite a skilled thing, isn't it? So I'm going to suggest that you probably have people you can call upon who can help tidy up the data, and then either off the shelf have some kind of systems which you put the data in, or build a spreadsheet out which analyzes the data, or use AI into those world. But that wouldn't be if the business owner who's looking at potentially selling doesn't have someone. With your international connections, I'm assuming you have quite a lot of connections yourself to put in assistance as required.
Absolutely, yes, is the very short answer. But what we look for first is to try and establish whether the business would benefit from having an in-house person doing a particular role. And one of the ones that's very often missing is finance director. And very typically that will start off by having a fractional FD. So yes, I know fractional FDs. We have a network of people who, we choose different ones for different businesses, but essentially they can fulfill the exact roles required. And again, if they outgrow the fractional FD and they need one of their own, well, that's natural progress as the business expands, and that's a natural way of doing things. But yes, there are a lot of people that we rely on who are professionals in their own right. So it starts from the other end with the business brokers, with the people who bring up the legal paperwork. We have wealth advisors. So you're not obliged to use our recommendation in any way, shape or form. But if you have a gap and you don't know how to fill it as a business owner, then absolutely, yes, we have people that we know and trust to do a good job for you.
Okay. So just a little bit of jargon busting here. What is a fractional director, a financial director?
So if we start with what does a financial director do, I think that's the easy part. He looks after the finances of the company from a strategic direction. And in the old world, they would tend to work 5 days a week for the same company, and they would be a regular employee of that company. But what we see now is there are typically people who have a lot of experience who have given up their full-time job with a single employer and are choosing to share their skills and their expertise with a small number, maybe half a dozen, usually not much more than that, maybe 10 different companies who might each get a day a month, a day a fortnight, a day a week, whatever it takes for that business to fulfill their own financial needs. The fractional FD means you're getting a fraction of his time. He's not costing you a full-time salary, but you are getting all of his expertise when you need it.
But would you not just use your accountant for that?
No. Typically, unfortunately, the way the accountancy world tends to work in the UK is that it's price-based. And most of the accountants feel that they have to offer a competitive price for what you want. And what you typically want is avoidance of trouble with HMRC. So the poor accountant can only do the bare minimum for you because most business owners don't realize the true value of an accountancy practice, and they don't pay what the accountant could do for them. So, yeah, a good accountant can come close to what an FD does, but generally people don't want to pay their accountants more than the bare minimum. So the accountants only give the bare minimum level of service, I'm afraid.
But again, I would have thought going through the journey you go through, you're improving efficiencies, and if you've got a fractional financial director in for 1 day a month or 2 days, you're probably going to reduce your accountancy costs because what you deliver to the accountant is going to be so much better condition and a position. It's going to be tidy, isn't it? So the accountant's really just challenging onto that final audit and tidying the final bits up.
Yes, that's very true. And what also tends to happen is that credit control is a big thing that somebody gets a grip of inside the company. And so again, you can have a fractional credit controller. So a similar thought process here. You need someone to chase up your customers once a week and say, excuse me, sir, you haven't paid, please could you, otherwise we'll put you in stop.
Yeah.
And that can be done, again, it could be half a day a week, it could be a very, very small amount of time. But the bonus that gives the boss, because if he used to be doing it, he'll probably fret because they're his lovely customers and he doesn't really want to chase them in case they're not happy. Yeah. Whereas if a very professional person does it, who's used to doing it every day, they have a lovely telephone manner, they're polite, they're firm, they get the bills paid, the cash flow goes up, business owner is delighted, and he sleeps at night because he knows his bills are paid. And it's just wonderful seeing the changes that happen because of small incremental differences in the way he's doing things.
Okay, so we've covered quite a large area of stages which we need to go through. Because I suggested we started at the end and then went to the beginning, perhaps it would be a good idea for you if you could just do a sort of a wrap up step by step of what the steps are and just to help our listeners out on this.
Thank you, Andrew. Yes, I think that's a great idea because we've described the far end and we've described the beginning, and the middle bit hasn't been done yet. So, as we said, stage one: understand where your business is now and get that to a good, solid foundation. Then, what we want to do is maximize the value of the business. So, understanding the roots, understanding what happens in the businesses, so the systems, the procedures, how is marketing done, how is sales done, how is corporate governance done, what's the ownership mindset, how do we get to peak performance or best practice in every area, how do we determine who is the likely next management. It could be sold in a number of different ways to a number of different people. And then we need to consider the event itself. You will become more wealthy. So how does the tax planning work? How does the documentation for the sale work? And then there is the event. And most people think it stops there because after all, you've sold the business. So what else is there? Well, after that, you need to make sure that your wealth is protected. Done badly, if you inherit or receive a lot of money from the proceeds of your business, the tax man say, thank you very much, that's unearned income, we'll take a large chunk. So there is tax planning that occurs before, but the actual effect happens after the business. So, and that then tends to lead on further to estate planning. So that's what do you want to do with this big wealth? Do you give it to your wife, your daughter, your grandchildren? How do you use it in the most tax effective way? So those are all of the stages of the journey. So you can see, I hope, that it's a whole lot more than just putting a card in the window and saying, I've got a business for sale. We want to take people on a journey that they know, they understand, that creates massive value for them, for their future.
Okay, that sounds brilliant. So if any of the listeners wanted to get an idea where they're sitting right at this moment, what would be the starting point? How do we start with this?
Okay, the easiest thing for them to do is to have a look at something that we call a sellability score. So it asks you some potentially impertinent questions about the way you run your business. And as long as we get, good answers back, there'll be an indication there. And obviously, we would invite the people who filled in the sellability score to have a bit of a conversation with us and see what do they think about the score they've had and is it something they'd like to improve on.
Okay, so what we'll do is we'll make sure a link is available to everyone who's listening or watching this podcast recording, and they just click on the link, answer some questions, it will give them a score. And if they want to take it from there, then I'm assuming there's a no charge pre-conversation to see if there's scope or not.
Yes, thank you, Andrew. That's exactly how it works. And just to let the listeners know, it will take 3 or 4 minutes because we are trying to ask some proper questions. So it will take a minute or two to fill in. Great.
Okay. So I'm going to make a shameless plug here. So this podcast has been brought to you by the Academy World. And my name's Andrew. What we do is we support businesses through whatever their stage is, through our connections with experts, just like Charlie here. So if whatever your need is, then please do reach out to us. Thank you very much, Charlie, for giving your time today. And as you know what Charlie does after listening to him for the last 40 minutes, but his contact details will be available on screen. So please do reach out to him if you're thinking of realizing the maximum valuation for your business.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you very much, Andrew. And I do urge business owners to have a think. Thank you.
Definitely. Okay. Thank you, everyone, for listening. And next week, we'll have another expert we'll be interviewing, and I look forward to catching up with everyone then. Take care now.
Thank you. Goodbye.